The wind howled across the barren land of Colony Zeta. Dust clouds danced like ghosts through the empty streets. It was a forgotten place, where no one cared to visit, except for one man who had built a small shelter far from the main city. His Vivi name was Ray, a human who had left Earth long ago. He liked silence, and the stars above gave him more comfort than people ever could. But one night, everything changed. It started with a knock. Ray froze, his hand hovering near his old laser rifle. No one came out here, not unless they were lost or dangerous. The knock came again, softer this time, almost desperate. He slowly opened the door. Weapon ready, there, standing in the cold dust, was a woman, not human. Her skin was pale violet, her eyes glowing faintly. She looked like she hadn't eaten in days. She fell to her knees, trembling. "Please," she said in a shaking voice. I need your help." Ray lowered his weapon, unsure what to say. Her arms were thin, her clothes torn, and strange marks were burned onto her skin. He helped her inside, confused but alert. "Who are you?" he asked, offering her water. She drank it fast, then coughed. I'm just someone trying to live," she whispered. Ray noticed her body was shaking even in the heat of his shelter. She clutched her stomach and looked at him with pleading eyes. "You're human." "Yes?" she asked. He nodded slowly. Then, "I beg you," she said, crawling closer. "Make me pregnant." Ray blinked, unsure if he heard her right. "What did you say?" he asked, almost laughing, but her eyes were full of tears, and she wasn't joking. "I don't want your money. I don't want your home," she said. "Just your seed." Ray stood up, confused and a little angry. "This some kind of trick?" he asked. She shook her head fast. "They're coming for me," she said. "The breeders, the scientists, they failed, so now they want to throw me away." Ray didn't understand. She pointed to the strange mark on her back. "It's a symbol." "I was chosen," she said, "but they said I was too weak to carry." Now Ray saw the truth. She wasn't just poor. She was broken, rejected by her own kind. And now she was begging a stranger to give her something more powerful than money. A future. He sat down slowly, trying to think. "Why me?" he asked. "Because you're human," she said. "And they said your kind might work." "Work for what?" "To save my species," she replied, her voice small like a dying star. Ray rubbed his face, unsure if this was madness or fate. She didn't try to touch him or seduce him. She just sat there, ready to be thrown out if he said no. He stared at her, then looked outside into the endless dark. Something inside him, something human, didn't let him say no. "Not yet. Stay the night," he said finally. "We'll talk tomorrow." She nodded, curling up on the floor without another word. Ray gave her a blanket, though he doubted it would help much. He watched her sleep, her face peaceful despite the pain. What kind of life had she run from? What kind of world forced someone to beg like this? He couldn't sleep. Her words kept echoing in his mind. "Make me pregnant, save my species." But it wasn't just a request. It was a cry from someone abandoned by everything, even hope. And that night, under the pale stars of Colony Zeta, Ray realized something terrifying. This woman didn't just want a child, she needed a miracle. Asterisk, the sun had not yet risen on Colony Zeta when Ray heard movement near the door. He reached for his rifle, but stopped when he saw her. The alien woman was already awake, sitting near the heater, arms wrapped around her knees. She hadn't slept much, and her eyes looked hollow, like someone waiting for the end. Ray walked over slowly, still unsure what to do with her. He didn't even know her name. "What do I call you?" he asked. She turned her head slightly, her voice quiet. "Vela," she whispered. "My name is Vela." It was the first time she said it, and even she sounded unsure. Ray nodded and poured her some hot water, the only thing he had left that felt like kindness. Vela took it, her thin hands shaking. "I've decided," Ray said, his voice low. "I'll help you, but not like you think." She looked at him with tired eyes, not surprised, not hopeful. "I'm not a machine," he said, "and you're not a tool. She blinked slowly, unsure of what he meant. I want to know why, he added. Not just the science. The truth. Vela lowered her head, her voice so soft it was almost lost in the wind outside. There are others like me, she said. Born during the collapse. Half-starved, half-dead. The old leaders believed breeding with humans could save us. She continued, but every trial failed. They made me a promise, she said, her voice cracking. They said if I could carry a child, I'd be free. Ray listened in silence. But when I didn't conceive after 2 cycles, they marked me. Thrown out like broken tech, she pulled up her sleeve, showing a number burned into her arm. I escaped before they recycled me, she said. Now I'm hunted for wasting resources. Ray felt cold inside. Recycled? He asked. They burn us, she said simply, or sell us to others far worse. He stood and paced the small room. He had heard stories of such programs on fringe colonies, but never believed they were real. Now one sat in front of him, breathing, hurting, begging. You don't have to give me anything, Vela whispered. I just didn't want to die without hope. Ray stopped walking. He looked down at her and saw something different, not just an alien woman, but someone with fire left in her heart. You said they'll come for you, he said. How long do we have? Vela looked at the door as if expecting it to open any moment. 2 days, maybe less, she said. They track energy pulses. I tried to stay hidden, but your shelter's signal might have alerted them. Ray cursed under his breath. He had lived alone for so long he forgot what it meant to hide. Now his peaceful exile was a beacon. We can't stay here, he said. Vela nodded, already on her feet, though she could barely stand. There's an old science shelter in the hills, Ray said. Abandoned years ago. Maybe still has shields. He grabbed his coat and gear, handing her a scarf to hide her face. They left before sunrise, walking through wind and dust. Vela stumbled often, but she never complained. Ray saw the pain in her movements, but also the strength she didn't know she had. She had survived rejection, abuse, and death itself. After hours of walking, they reached a small metal dome half buried in sand. Ray used an old access code, surprised when it actually worked. The door opened with a loud hiss. Stale air rushing out. Inside was dark, cold, and empty, but safer than the world outside. Vela sat down with a sigh, her legs giving out. Ray activated a small power cell, lighting up the space. Old machines stood silent, but one wall panel blinked, still alive. Ray approached it, curious, then froze. There was a message waiting in the system, a single line, blinking on the dusty screen. Target located, retrieval team en route. Ray's blood turned to ice. He turned to Vela, who looked up at him with fear in her eyes. They already know, she said, her voice breaking. They're coming. Ray looked at the door, then at her, then back at the screen. He didn't say it out loud, but he knew it clearly in his heart. He would not let them take her. The moment Ray sealed the door of the science shelter, silence fell like a heavy blanket. But that silence didn't feel safe. It felt like the pause before a storm. Vela sat in a corner, her body shivering not from cold, but from something deeper. Something inside her was breaking again. Ray stood at the control panel, trying to wipe dust from the old screen. He tapped the keys, checked the signals, ran a scan. No power signatures nearby. No ships in the sky yet. But that message, retrieval team en route, it haunted him. Like a ticking bomb, he turned to speak. But Vela was already coughing, sharp, dry coughs that shook her body. Ray rushed to her side, helping her lean back. You okay? He asked, but her face was pale and wet with sweat. She clutched her chest, breathing in short, pained gasps. It's starting again, she whispered. The rejection. My body's failing. Ray didn't understand, but she reached into her torn satchel and pulled out a small vial. A cracked glass tube with green fluid, half spilled. This was my stabilizer, she said. It stopped my blood from collapsing. Ray took it from her hands and stared at it. It was useless now. She was dying. Slowly, painfully, in that moment, something in Ray shifted. He didn't care about her being alien anymore. She wasn't just some outsider begging for help. She was someone who didn't want to die forgotten. He stood up and moved to the back of the lab. Old drawers, rusted boxes, and shelves full of outdated medical gear. After a few minutes of searching, he found something, a case of emergency nanobots, still sealed, though long expired. He carried it over and showed it to her. "These might work," he said, "if your body accepts them." Vila looked at the case like it was gold. "No one's tried mixing human tech with our blood," she said. "It could heal me or kill me." Ray knelt beside her, opened the case, and loaded one injector. "I'll take the risk," he said. She didn't stop him, just looked into his eyes and gave a small nod. He pressed the injector to her neck and fired. She screamed, her body arching in pain, veins glowing for a moment under her skin. Then she collapsed motionless. Ray panicked, checking her pulse weak. But there, he stayed beside her for what felt like hours, watching her chest rise and fall, slow but steady. Her breathing calmed, the sweat faded. She was stable again for now. Then, without warning, a sound echoed through the metal shelter. Footsteps, but not human. Too heavy, too sharp. Ray grabbed his rifle and stood near the entrance. He activated the scanner panel, only one lifeform outside. But it wasn't one of the retrieval soldiers. It was another alien female. She wore dark robes and had the same violet skin, but her eyes were cold. She walked in without fear, her gaze landing directly on Vila, so the woman said, her voice sharp. "You ran to a human after all." Ray raised his weapon, but she didn't flinch. "I'm her sister," she said calmly, "and I'm here to take her back." Vila stirred, hearing the voice. Her eyes opened slowly, and when she saw the woman, she gasped, "Nira." "Not you." Ray looked between them, confused. "You know her?" he asked. Vila nodded, barely able to sit up. "She sold me to the program," she whispered. "My own blood." Nira laughed coldly. "It was for the good of our people," she said. "You were the weak one, the throwaway, and now you hide behind a man." Ray's finger tightened on the trigger. "She's not going anywhere," he said. "Not with you." Nira tilted her head, amused. "You think you can protect her?" she asked. "From the whole galaxy?" Ray didn't answer, but his eyes didn't waver. Nira smiled, then stepped back into the hallway. "I'll return soon," she said, "with those who don't ask." Then she vanished into the dust. Ray closed the door, locking it tight. Vila sat against the wall, silent, tears in her eyes. "She bring them all," she said, "and when they come, they won't ask questions." Ray looked at her, then at the stars above through a crack in the roof. "Then we better be ready," he whispered, "because now, it wasn't just about helping a stranger. It was about fighting for her right to exist." Night fell like a curtain of shadows across the old science shelter. The air inside was heavy, filled with quiet tension and the hum of dying power cells. Ray didn't sleep, not even for a second. He sat near the door, his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness through a cracked window. Vila lay curled under a silver blanket, her breathing soft but uneven. The nanobots were working, but slowly. She murmured in her sleep, words in a language Ray didn't understand. Sometimes she whispered names. Sometimes she cried silently. Ray's thoughts were not quiet. He kept replaying the moment Nira walked in, so calm, so confident, the kind of person who always comes back. But what haunted him most was what Vila said after Nira left. "She'll bring them all." Ray had seen enough to know it was true. This wasn't over. It was just the beginning. Just before sunrise, Ray left Vila a note and slipped outside. He needed to set traps, find escape routes, and collect anything they could use. The old shelter wasn't built for defense. It was made for hiding, not surviving. As he moved through the cold terrain, his boots crushed small glass-like stones underfoot. He didn't notice the shadow following him, at least not until he turned a corner and found a red flare burning in the sand. Smoke curled upward, and beside it was a metal box. He bent down slowly, lifted the lid empty inside. Except for one thing, a folded piece of clothing. Vila's original robe, the same one she wore when she arrived at his door. It was blood-stained, torn, and freshly placed. Ray stood quickly, aiming his rifle around, but no one was there. He ran back to the shelter without looking back. As he approached, he heard something. Voices. Not many, but enough. One was soft and terrified, the other sharp and commanding. Ray burst through the door, gun raised. Nira stood there again, this time with a small communication device in her hand. Vila was standing too, her hands up, her face pale. "I told her not to hurt you," Vila said quickly. "I begged her." Ray looked at Nira, furious. "How did you get in?" he asked. "I never left," she said with a cruel smile. "I watched you leave and walked in." Vila stepped between them. "She says she just wants to talk," she whispered. "But she never just talks." Nira raised her hand, showing the device. "One word and soldiers arrive within minutes," she said. "But I came alone for now." Ray didn't lower his weapon. "You sold your sister," he said. "What do you want now?" Nira stepped closer, her voice quiet but dangerous. "I want what she carries." Ray's heart skipped. "What she carries?" Nira's eyes flicked to Vila's stomach. "She's no longer empty, is she?" Vila froze, her lips parted in shock. I don't know," she whispered. "How could I be?" Nira smiled wider. "You were touched by a human," she said. "That's enough." Ray didn't understand, but Vila looked down at her own body, confused and afraid. "Let me take her," Nira said. "We'll test the child, raise it for the future of our kind." Ray felt rage building in his chest. "She's not a lab," he said. "She's a person." Nira laughed softly. "She stopped being a person when she failed the tests," she said. "You just didn't know." Without warning, Ray fired, not at her, but at the device in her hand. It shattered into sparks. Nira jumped back, eyes wide. "You've made a mistake," she hissed. "Now they'll come faster." "I don't care," Ray growled. "You're not taking her." Nira turned and ran, disappearing again, like smoke in the wind. Ray locked the door, then turned to Vila. She sat down, shaking, her hand pressed against her belly. "Did she say the truth?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Could I be?" Ray knelt beside her. "We'll find out," he said. "But not here." She looked up at him, eyes wet with something more than fear. Hope, maybe. Before they could speak again, the floor rumbled softly, a warning tremor. Something big was coming, and this time it wouldn't knock. The walls trembled again, stronger this time, like something massive was pushing against the earth from beneath. Ray grabbed his pack and checked the old exit hatch near the rear of the shelter. Vila stood nearby, swaying slightly, her hand still resting on her belly. She didn't speak, but her eyes were full of fear and something else he hadn't seen before. Determination. "We have to go," Ray said. "Now." Vila nodded, but her legs almost gave out. Ray didn't wait. He helped her up and threw a small cloak over her shoulders. The metal walls groaned again as another tremor shook the floor. "Are those machines?" Vila asked, her voice shaky. Ray didn't answer, but they both knew it wasn't a natural quake. Outside, the wind was sharp and cold, but the sky was burning red with low-flying lights, dropships, silent and dark, sliding through the clouds. Like sharks, Ray led Vila into the hills behind the shelter. He knew these trails, had walked them when he first arrived on Zeta. Now they were his only hope. The two climbed through narrow rock paths and broken caves, lit only by Ray's wrist torch. Behind them, a deep mechanical thud echoed, a drop pod hitting the ground. Then another, and another. Vila turned her head. Just once, and her breath caught out on the flatland. 6 armored figures stepped from the smoke, tall, silver, faceless, their arms turned into weapons, their eyes glowing white. "They're not soldiers," she whispered. "They're hunters." Ray moved faster, helping her over a fallen boulder. The cave narrowed, then opened again into a deep underground basin. And there, hidden under layers of moss and rock, sat something unexpected. A crashed escape pod, old, rusted but intact. Ray's heart raced. He rushed to it. Wiping dirt from the control panel. Still has some power. He muttered, "If I can start this, we might have a chance." Vela leaned against the pod, her breathing uneven. She closed her eyes and whispered words from her own tongue. Ray didn't ask what they meant, but he felt the pain in them. The screen inside the pod flickered. A message appeared: genetic match, human confirmed. Initializing override. Ray, wait. Before he could touch anything, the pod's inner lights turned green. A strange hum filled the air, and Vela let out a small cry. She dropped to her knees, her hand gripping her stomach tightly. Ray rushed to her side. "What's wrong?" he asked. Her skin was glowing, just faintly, but it was real. "It's growing," she whispered, her voice full of disbelief. "The child. It's real. It's inside me." Ray stared at her, unsure how it was possible. They had never touched in that way, never done what her request implied. But somehow, her body had responded. "You never needed me physically," Ray said, stunned. Vela looked up at him, her eyes wide. "I just needed a bond," she said. "A willing heart. Your kindness. Your protection." Tears filled her eyes. That was enough. Suddenly, the ground above cracked. Dust rained from the cave ceiling. A beam of white light broke through. Then another. The hunters were scanning the cave system. Ray turned to the pod, hit the activation switch. The engine whined, coughed, then came to life. He pulled Vela inside and shut the hatch. "She can't run," he told the ship. "You have to lift us out now." Manual override accepted. The voice replied, "Outside." The light from above turned solid. It wasn't just scanning anymore. Something was coming down through it. Ray didn't wait. The pod lifted, engines roaring through the stone. Chunks of earth broke loose, crashing down behind them. As they rose into the open air, Ray looked down through the cracked window. The hunters stood below, staring silently. One of them raised an arm and fired too late. The pod burst into the clouds. Vela clutched his arm tightly, her eyes closed. "I thought I'd never escape," she whispered. Ray held her close. "You're not just escaping," he said softly. "You're starting over, high above Zeta, in a rusted pod powered by forgotten tech and one stubborn human's heart." The poor alien woman finally allowed herself to believe. Maybe, just maybe, she would live. Asterisk. The stars outside the pod window were like frozen sparks in a sea of black. Ray sat in the pilot seat, his hands gripping the controls, even though autopilot had already taken over. Vela slept beside him, strapped in tightly, her chest rising and falling slowly. But even in sleep, her hands stayed over her belly, protecting the life that was now growing inside her. Ray wasn't sure how long they'd been in the sky. Minutes? Hours? Time felt strange out here. The pod's engine hummed with old power, barely holding them together. They weren't safe, yet not even close. The onboard system beeped, and a red light flashed. Incoming transmission detected. Ray muted it. But the screen turned on anyway. A familiar face appeared near her. "Running won't change the outcome," she said calmly. Ray leaned forward, his jaw tight. "You sent hunters after her," he said. "You wanted to cut her open like a lab rat." Nera's voice didn't change. "I sent them to retrieve our future," she said. "Not to harm her, unless you interfered." Ray laughed bitterly. "You think you deserve her now? After what you did?" Nera narrowed her eyes. "She is not just a sister anymore," she said. "She is now a symbol. She's a person," Ray snapped. "Not your breeding hope, not your flag." Nera tilted her head. "Then ask her why her body chose you," she said. "Ask her what the child truly is." The screen cut off, leaving silence behind. Ray looked at Vela, still asleep. What did she mean? He opened the pod's med scanner, placed it gently near her. The machine hummed and displayed something strange. The child was developing fast, too fast, and not just alien, not just human. It was something else. a fusion of DNA that had no record. A perfect hybrid. A child that should have taken months was forming in days. Ray pulled back, stunned. Just then, Vela stirred. She opened her eyes slowly, looked at him. "You scanned me," she said softly. "Not angry, just tired. I had to." He replied, "Your child." "It's not normal," she nodded slowly. "I didn't know it would happen like this," she said, "but I hoped." Ray sat beside her. "Nira said you chose me." "Why?" Vela looked away, her voice low. "Because you were the only one who looked at me and didn't see a product. You helped me when I was dirty, weak, unwanted," she said. "That changed my body." "My blood," Ray blinked, not understanding. "Our kind," she explained. "We evolved to respond to kindness, not to touch. It's why the others failed," she said. "They tried force, science, but never care." Ray looked down, the weight of her words settling in his chest. "You were dying," he said, "and all I did was care." She smiled, the first real smile he'd seen on her face, and that was everything. Before he could speak again, the pod jolted hard. Warning lights flashed, gravity pull detected. They were being caught in orbit. A planet was pulling them down, one not marked on their maps. Ray grabbed the controls. "We're going in," he said. "Brace yourself." The pod roared as it fell, shaking violently. Flames licked the windows. Metal creaked under pressure. Vela gripped his arm, her eyes wide with fear but filled with trust. They hit the surface hard. The world beneath them cracked open like glass under their impact. Everything went black. Ray woke first, coughing in smoke. He unbuckled himself and checked Vela. She was alive, breathing, but outside the cracked pod door, something strange glowed through the mist. A blue forest with trees that shimmered like crystals and soil that pulsed like veins. Ray opened the hatch slowly, gun ready. The air smelled sweet, electric, almost unreal. But what chilled him was the shape in the distance. A ship not theirs, not old, and definitely not friendly. They hadn't landed alone. Whoever had tracked them, they were already here. Ray looked back at Vela, who was now awake and staring into the forest. "This place," she whispered, "it's sacred land to my people." She touched her stomach again. "I think the child led us here," she said. Ray didn't know what that meant, but deep inside, he knew this was no random crash. They had landed exactly where the child needed to be. The forest pulsed with a quiet heartbeat, like the planet itself was alive. Ray stepped out of the cracked pod, his boots sinking slightly into the glowing ground. Behind him, Vela followed slowly, her body still weak, her hands protectively. Over her stomach, above them, strange birds flew silently, and the sky shimmered like liquid glass. This place didn't feel dangerous, it felt ancient, like something sacred had been waiting here long before either of them arrived. And yet, danger was not far, in the distance. The silver ship still sat like a silent blade stabbed into the ground. "They followed us," Ray said quietly. Vela nodded, her expression calm but heavy with understanding. "They won't leave without the child," she whispered. "But this land won't let them take him." Ray looked at her, surprised. "Him?" he asked. Vela smiled, her eyes distant. "I can feel him now," she said. "He's aware, listening, growing faster than I thought possible." Ray placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and warm. "I won't let them take either of you," he said. Vela turned to him, her voice soft and sure. "Then don't fight for me like I'm helpless," she said. "Fight beside me." Before Ray could answer, a noise echoed through the trees. Footsteps, not stomping like soldiers, soft, deliberate. Figures in smooth armor stepped into view, their faces hidden by blank helmets. Nira stood in front of them, cloaked in black, eyes glowing faintly. "You made it farther than I thought," she said coldly. Vela stepped forward, leaning slightly on Ray, but standing tall. "You have no right to follow us here," she said. "This land belongs to the old ones." Nira laughed once. "You think myths will protect you?" she said. We are the future now. Ray stepped between them. Raising his weapon. No, he said. The future is what grows inside her. Not you, Nira signaled her guards. But something stopped them. The forest began to glow brighter. Blue veins in the ground lit up like fire beneath glass. The trees swayed without wind, and the air thickened with static. Then, from the earth itself, a voice rose not heard, but felt, blood-born of choice. Shall not be taken. Everyone froze, even Nira. The guards looked around, suddenly unsure. Vila's eyes glowed faintly, her hand still resting on her belly. The child has awakened this place, she said, almost in awe. Ray stepped back. To her side, eyes locked on the trembling soldiers. Nira shouted something in her alien tongue, but her voice shook. Another flash of light burst from the ground, and vines made of crystal rose. They wrapped around the guards gently but firmly, pulling their weapons away. Nira stumbled back, face pale. This isn't possible, she hissed. She was marked useless. Vila raised her head, her voice steady. Your marks meant nothing. She said, I was never broken. I was just waiting for the right moment. Nira looked at Ray, pure hate in her eyes. You did this, she spat. You polluted our bloodline, Ray smiled, not with pride, but with something stronger conviction. No, he said, I gave it a reason to live. The forest grew brighter, and the guards vanished into light. Nira screamed, but no one helped her. The vines reached for her too, but Vila raised her hand. Stopping them. Let her leave, Vila said. Let her live in shame. Knowing she was wrong, the forest obeyed, releasing Nira with a shiver of silence. She turned and ran, vanishing into the glowing trees. And just like that, the forest returned to calm. Ray stood there. Blinking at the stillness, Vila leaned against him, exhausted but smiling. You're glowing, he said softly. So are you, she whispered back. They looked up at the sky, stars blinking through the canopy, in this strange sacred land. Neither fully human nor fully alien. They had found something rare, a beginning, not built by conquest, or science or bloodlines, but by kindness. Vila sat down in the grass, letting out a long breath. The child is safe now, she said. He will be born in light, not fear. Ray sat beside her, quiet. After a moment, Vela looked at him and asked the question she'd once whispered in desperation. Will you still stay? Now that I no longer need you? Ray smiled, the stars reflecting in his eyes. I didn't stay because you needed me, he said. I stayed because I wanted to. And this time, Vila cried not from fear, but from joy, far away from the cold world that rejected her, in the arms of a human who saw her not as a vessel, but as a person. The poor alien woman was poor no longer. She had everything now: life, love, and a future she never thought she'd be allowed to dream.